Now, for nearly 5 years, Cameroon's military has been fighting separatists in the west of the country. They're from Francophone Cameroon's English-speaking minority, and they want to form a breakaway state called Ambazonia. The conflict has already cost more than 3,000 lives, and 2 rebel bomb attacks this month suggest that the conflict may have entered a new phase. Cameroon's defense ministry said that the weapons hardware seemed to have been supplied by fundamentalist groups outside of the country. Well, to learn more about the conflict in Cameroon, I am joined by Ilaria Allegrozzi, a senior researcher at Human Rights Watch. Ms. Allegrozzi, thank you so much for joining us. Can you just start by telling us about those latest developments and these attacks that we learned about this month?
Yes, absolutely. There's been an escalation in the crisis in the Anglophone regions. Recently, we have seen a number of attacks perpetrated by separatist groups in both the northwest and southwest regions. And the government forces responded, of course, with heavy hand, deploying more troops to the Anglophone regions. As Human Rights Watch, we have often documented abusive counterinsurgency operations by the security forces in those regions with consequences on the civilian populations.
And Cameroon's defense ministry has suggested that separatists may be working with groups outside of the country. Do we have any idea what those groups may be?
It should be noted that this crisis in the Anglophone regions has already spilled off the country's borders. First of all, you have over 60,000 Cameroonian refugees in Nigeria. And then separatist groups are also growing stronger and stronger. And we have seen an increase in attacks perpetrated by the separatists with the use of improvised explosive devices recently. And the separatists have largely now replaced their initial equipment in terms of weapons and ammunitions with more sophisticated weapons acquired from multiple sources, including from allied groups in Nigeria, but also dealers in Nigeria and also from the United States, from the diaspora.
And how have Cameroon and Nigeria been responding to this insurgency?
The response of the Cameroonian government has been pretty much a military one. Troops have been deployed in the Anglophone regions since 2016. Paul Biya declared war on these groups, which have been labeled as terrorists, a solution which didn't really had the impact and didn't bring to peace so far. And that's why we believe that for a lasting solution in the Anglophone regions, the response should instead focus on dialogue and also some justice and accountability for crimes perpetrated by both sides in the Anglophone regions.
And have there been any regional or international groups supporting your calls for that dialogue?
The response of the international community came late, only a couple of years after the crisis started. And we have reiterated our call for the international community to, first of all, press the government to find a peaceful solution, to discipline also the security forces while conducting counterinsurgency operation. And we have seen calls also from the UN Secretary General, which are very welcome, but more needs to be done to ensure that there's a political commitment to end this crisis.
And do you think it's possible to end this crisis through dialogue? What are the separatists' demands?
I think that the response should really focus on justice and accountability. There has been basically a total lack of investigations and prosecutions for crimes committed by both sides. This has fueled abuses. This has created a climate of impunity. So unless the solution focuses on justice for the victims who have suffered so much since this crisis began, I don't think that we will get very far.
Can you talk more about what crimes have been committed on both sides and what the impact has been on civilians?
Yes, the impact on civilians has been devastating. Crimes have been committed by both government forces. They have killed civilians. They have razed to the ground hundreds of homes. They have burned down villages, and we have documented several of these operations. On the separatist side, they have also committed abuses. They have kidnapped, attacked, assaulted thousands of students and teachers. They have used schools as their bases and camps. Unfortunately, education has been one of the main casualty in this conflict, and many attacks have been perpetrated against school buildings, students. Parents of students have been assaulted, threatened, because the separatist fighters enforced a vicious boycott of school, depriving thousands of children of their fundamental right to education.
And have aid groups been able to enter the region and provide services at all?
The access to the Anglophone regions is very challenging. It has been severely disrupted by the insecurity, but also by the fact that soldiers and separatist fighters are targeting humanitarian staff and convoys. The crisis in the Anglophone regions has resulted in a major humanitarian crisis and also a human rights crisis. Over 700,000 people are internally displaced in the Anglophone regions and neighboring regions. Access to basic services such as healthcare and education has been disrupted, and this has led to over 2 million people in need of urgent humanitarian assistance. Unfortunately, this crisis seldom makes it to the headlines of international media, and so it has largely remained a neglected crisis so far.
Yeah, clearly there is an urgent crisis, as you say, in the region, but that it hasn't been getting a lot of media attention. Why do you think that is?
I think it's primarily because the government is trying to hinder access to the Anglophone regions and prevent any oversight of what's happening there in an effort to keep control of the situation and to show that everything is under control. But also violence has been rife. Attacks against civilians have been rife since now over 4 years. So also the insecurity is making it difficult for people to access these areas and for humanitarian personnel, for example, to assess the needs of those who have been internally displaced and have fled to remote areas in the bush where they're still living.
Ilaria Allegrozzi, thank you so much for joining us and shedding light on a conflict that we certainly should be talking much more about. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's just about 8:45 a.m. here in Paris. Let's get a reminder now of our top stories. Former Catalan leader Carles Puigdemont has been arrested in Italy. He faces extradition to Spain, where he is wanted for sedition over the 2017 independence referendum that saw him flee into exile. And candidates in Germany hold their final debate ahead of Sunday's federal election. Polls show the Conservative Alliance once again tightening the gap with the leading socialist.